I'm Corbett Wall with DVAuction, here with your feeder flash for Monday, April the 1st, April Fool's Day, brought to you in part by Macrocin by Bimeda. Macrocin is proven efficacy at an affordable upfront price. A telithromycin injection, basically a generic Draxin with no BS, end of story. To listen to some testimonials about how good it works, go to macrocin.com. Also, Joplin Regional Stockyards expecting about 5,000 head for the regular Monday sale here today on Monday, not starting until 7 o'clock. That would be like most sale barns, not starting until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. But just a lighter run. There's fewer cattle around. We've sold so many of them through February and March there, and we're just running short of cattle that are in loose hands, and we're starting to fill up those major grazing areas, so the orders are running out there. Most of the guys that are selling them went ahead and sold them when the stocker buyers were aggressive and when the market was the best. But market slipped last week for obvious reasons. We're going to talk about that, but then came back late in the week, so I expect Joplin to be a pretty good sale here on Monday. But check out a couple of specials they're having at Joplin this Thursday. Actually next Thursday, April the 11th, they're having primetime livestock video sale there. Be at the stockyard at Joplin. Starts at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. They'll have a lot of big strings of cattle on there. And then this month's special cow and bull sale is going to be on a Friday the 19th this month, starting at 4:30 in the afternoon. We'll talk more about those as they get closer. But uncharted territory. Now that's where we're at right now. It's not because things got so wild last week. It's because these packers are in so much desperate need for something. And I mean both fat steers and heifers and cows and bulls. Now the cow and bull packers don't have the formula type deals. They get a lot of stuff delivered right into the plant there, but especially when prices get high, people tend to take their cattle, their cows and bulls, slaughter way up cows and bulls to the sale to let the buyers compete on them. And it's a wonderful thing. It's not a novel idea, but it's a wonderful thing to see price transparency in action there. But we've seen all-time record high prices for slaughter cows and bulls last week. We saw a lot of places selling bulls up in the 180s there, and we even saw a place or two selling some big heavy muscled high dressing bulls over $2 a pound. Now that is extreme. Seen a lot of places selling cows over $1.50 in the 150s there. We've never seen that before. And you think, well, what about boneless beef or the cutter cow cutout there or things like that? Remember the gouging during COVID? That's when all those beef prices were high, but the cattle people didn't get to take advantage of that. Cattle prices were barely unchanged there during the COVID, and your packers were gouging the consumers because they weren't able to keep the processing as high as what they wanted. So we saw all-time record high prices in all of our beef markets back during that. And so even though we're seeing all-time record high prices in other classes of slaughter cattle now, that doesn't mean we're going to see those or take those out anytime soon on beef prices, because they were partying during the COVID there, and you guys remember how ridiculous that was. But your fat cattle showed strength last week. That's another uncharted territory. It's full knowledge that your packers are desperate for cattle, and they didn't buy a lot of cattle negotiated last week. They still have to buy cattle negotiated to fill all of their needs, and they didn't buy very many last week, and they thought they were going to get the market pushed down. They made a big strong showing mostly on the board, trying to kill the board last Tuesday from the news that came out about the bird flu, handful of cows in some dairies in the southwest there. And we knew about those dairy cows in the southwest, that something was wrong. Whatever it was going to be was not going to be good. Then that news come out, and there was kind of delayed reaction. All of a sudden they decided to make a big deal out of it. about midday on Tuesday of last week, whenever we had known about it before that. But it only worked for a little bit. They did crater the board on Tuesday, but then it started coming back. We did not regain all the losses on the board the rest of the week, but we pretty much regained most of the fat cattle market that we had lost, with the handful of weak sisters that started puking their cattle on Tuesday and early Wednesday, which it wasn't very many. But most of the guys stayed tough, especially up in the northern plains where they sell a lot more cattle negotiated. Those guys stuck their boot heels in the ground and they got more for their cattle. In some places they got steady prices for their cattle. In other places it was only $1 or $2 cheaper, where it was going to be several dollars cheaper if everybody would have went along with what was going on last Tuesday. So when with no more cattle than they got bought this week, you know, some people say that higher prices aren't the result of more negotiated trade, or more negotiated trade aren't the result of higher prices. They absolutely are. So not this past week, but the week before, when we gained all that ground, there was a huge movement in negotiated trade. Last week, they were trying to whittle the prices lower, and guys just held on to them, and there wasn't a whole lot of negotiated trade. That's the way that goes. But you've got to have negotiated trade to get higher prices, and vice versa there. But, you know, it's a pretty interesting time right here, and if the guys that have fat cattle ready will really stick to their guns, we can keep this market going. You know, they've tried several of these black swans here to kill the market, but it is sheer supply and demand that is driving these all-time record highs. Now, we lost a little bit off there. We had an all-time record high week before last, but last week we lost about $1.50 off of that. We can get that back this week if guys will stay tough, but you can't let them sway you by these different things. Now this week it's going to be the corn market. Now what the heck corn has to do with finished fat cattle, I'll never know, but they always tend to try to get it to work that way. But the fat cattle that I know are done with the corn. Now feeder cattle, they may be able to beat them down on the board some and try to suck down the fat cattle there, but that's just some of the ploys that they use. But be ready for that, because late last week they had that prospective plantings report. It was bullish for corn, and on Thursday we saw it go up 15.25 cents a bushel, which is, oh, it's significant, but as volatile as those grain markets are, it's not unheard of. But intended plantings of corn acres for this year's crop, this 2024 crop, is 90.036 million acres. That is down from the average estimate quite a bit, which was 91.776, and it's also down 5% from what we had last year of planted acres of corn. But you know, there's plenty of corn in South America. There's fewer cattle eating the corn. That's where a lot of it goes. So I think we're in good shape there, okay? But you can't let these guys sway you one way or the other. And we got to stand up for the market that we deserve here on fat cattle. And guys, stick to your guns, and we can get some more of that record price back on our fat steers and heifers this week. Let's talk about your board for last week. April live cattle futures. Monday was down $1.30. Tuesday was down $3.10. You remember that. All about the bird flu scare. Wednesday was up 50 cents. Thursday was up $1.40, and then Good Friday, your board was closed, thank God. And then, so your April live cattle ended the week at $185 smooth, and that is under what fat cattle brought last week. That was down $2.50 for the week. June live cattle ended at $180.25. That was down $2.65. Feeder cattle futures for March, which we're still talking about March, but it was fairly active earlier last week. But Monday was down 50 cents, Tuesday down $1.72, Wednesday was up 32, Thursday down 30 cents, Friday closed. March feeder cattle ended and went off the board at 247.75, and that would be fairly close to what your CME cash feeder cattle index was, down $2.20 for the week. April ended the week at 247.12, down 438, and May ended at 248.70. May corn ended the week at 442, actually up only 2 3/4 cents because it had been down kind of all week. And even though we saw a big jolt on Thursday, it was not up very much for the week. May beans 11.91 down a penny. Kansas City hard red winter wheat for May ended the week at 585 down 5 1/4. Your fat cattle trade through Thursday of last week, only 42,400 head, and we didn't see a whole lot of trade early on Friday. So unless we saw a bunch of trade that not very many of us knew about late Friday, and over the weekend even, which I didn't hear anything about, it's going to be a pretty light trade negotiated. It's going to leave your packers short bought, guys. But live steers and heifers last week in the 5 area sold from 184 to 191. That was $2 lower. Your weighted average on live steers up through Thursday was 188.10. That was about almost $1.50 cheaper than the all-time record that we set the previous week. Dress sales ranged from 297 to 302. That was $1 to as much as $8 lower, because remember, had a little bit of 310 there last week. And your weighted average on dress steers was 299.58, down 241. As a whole, your market in the Northern Plains was steady to $1 lower, live at 190. Your dress market was $2 lower at $3. Southern Plains was $2 lower at 186 for the most part. Now a little bit of trade on Friday, 1,300 in Iowa, less than 14,000 for the week, which is nothing for them. Live sales in Iowa on Friday, 190 to 191, right up there at the top of the price range, and dress sales at $3. Nebraska only 400 head, and about 17,500 for them, which is extremely light. Live sales in Nebraska, 188 to 190. No trade in Kansas recorded on Friday, 7,300 for the week. No trade in Texas on Friday, 5,500 head for the week. Box beef cutout values were lower last week, so packers sure don't have things going their way. They'd kind of had a rally on this box beef, but ran out of steam last week. Your weighted average on all of last week's choice cuts, 309.13. That was $3.76 lower than the weighted average from the previous week. And your late Friday sales were about $2.50 lower than that. So, not getting a lot of drive in the box beef market, even though we felt like we've had an early spring, but now we're getting a few storms here that are kind of squashing that. But your weighted average on all of last week's select cuts, 301.05, down $1.78 from the previous week's weighted average. And your late sales on select cuts were actually $2.40 higher than that. So actually your choice select spread late in the week was only a little over $3. So we don't see that very often, guys, especially when it gets grilling time here. But on the weighted average, your choice select spread was a little over $8. And all that information based on 658 loads of cuts, grinds, and trimmings. Your slaughter last week, very disappointing, 586,000. Notice that normally we get about 630. We've been clinging on to 600. Now, this last week, 586. That was down 12,000 from the previous week, down 59,000 from the same week a year ago. Saturday's kill was only 5,000 head. Talk about what else is going on. NationalBeefWire.com is your go-to website to find all the information that you need to know about cattle markets, about cattle sales, about cattle products, just anything you need to know about the commercial cattle, and also a lot of what you need to know about your purebred and your production sales there is on NationalBeefWire.com. Check it out. Get on that e-newsletter, electronic newsletter that's free. It can be right in your inbox every morning. It includes a link to this feeder flash report that you see all the time. Let's talk about your feeder cattle market. Your real-time index on DVAuction ended the week at 244.93. That was down $8.50 from the previous week, all due to the bird flu cow scare there, and due to the board being sucked back so much. Your latest CME cash feeder cattle index was 248.99. It'll be coming down a little bit more. But the guys are around hooking up some new sale barns last week. The latest sale barn to install DVAuction broadcasting is Stanton Union Stockyards in Stanton, Virginia. That's my buddy Todd Weichert, who I got to see here 2 or 3 weeks ago and really enjoyed getting to visit with him for the first time in about 25 years. But it was good to see Todd. Good to have them on board. I think it's going to feature their sale and get them a little bit more exposure there in that part of Virginia. Their regular sales are on Tuesdays starting at 1 o'clock Central, guys. And you can see them on DVAuction.com from now on. How about your cash feeders in your auctions last week? $5 to $10 lower in most cases and on all classes. But the lightweights, the pressure from the new crop soft calves were really pulling them down. And as temperatures start to heat up, people aren't crazy about getting new arrivals of unweaned new crop calves after they've been enjoying those hard calves and those little light yearlings for so long. But we saw not too many big sales over the weekend or late last week. I'll give you a few quotes there. How about Mankato Livestock in Mankato, Kansas? They sold some steers, 66 head of them, weighed 863 at 247.75. Now that's way over your real-time index based on an 800-pound steer, and those weighed 863. The market started coming back strong late Thursday and the few sales that they had on Friday after we overcome that black swan that didn't happen there for the packers and the funds that can't wait to ride this board down. And so that strength showed in the market was very evident in the few sales that we had over the weekend, which is why I say I think Joplin will be good. Oklahoma City should be good, but they're only going to have like 3,000 head because we're running out of cattle, guys. How about Bluegrass Stockyards, Richmond, Kentucky? They sell 116 steers, weighed 912, way out there in Kentucky at 240, guys. Pretty good market. How about your NationalBeefWire stick-out sale of the day for late last week and over the weekend? It was Fort Pierre Livestock Auction in Fort Pierre, South Dakota. Listen to some of these quotes. Their steers were $3 to $12 higher there. Feeding steers and steer calves too. They had 1,355 head of 8-weight steers. They averaged 854 with a weighted average price of $265.43. You think the moods got healed up there late last week and over the weekend? I mean, guys were hungry for cattle. $265 on a 8.5 weight steer. That's some of the highest quotes that we've seen here all spring. And they got them on over 1,350 head of them. They sold 63 replacement heifers, weighed 732 at 279, guys, for heifers. But they also had the most impressive quote that I saw anywhere, and it was your Macrocin No BS top quote for the day out of Fort Pierre Livestock Auction, Fort Pierre, South Dakota. 56 steers, weighed 707 at $300.50. And that's your feeder flash for Monday.